Hello, this is the tradesight stocks and futures index analysis and economic roadmap for the week of Monday, April 8th, 2013, heading into April 12th. Hope you have a great trading week. Here's a look at the S&P 500 index. This thing's been trucking along pretty nicely since November. But you'll notice we did have a rollover a bit this week. There was a sharp down day on Wednesday, really nice volume, then sort of a measuring day on Thursday, and then the economic data, the employment data in particular on Friday was a negative. The market gapped down and then recovered about half of that gap. But you'll notice the important thing here is that we did bounce right off the trend line. So again, even though there are signs of the market topping, our goal isn't to be the first ones on the short side of the market. It's to analyze what's going on in the market. But you really don't want to be short until there's a lot of downward pressure, consistent movement. If you were to break this trend line sharply, that would kind of signal the, obviously the end of this 5-month uptrend. And obviously with the sequester going on, there's an impact on jobs, money going out into the economy. It's having a very negative impact in general. And if this doesn't get solved soon, I expect this to lead to further downside. Now the flip side is, there's a couple points you can watch. For example, this red line here is 1500 is our last static trend line off of a 9-bar setup phase there. Obviously that could be an easy trade to target. You can get there in a day or two, wouldn't be a big deal. Could be support. Going to find more support back at 1475. That was that nice breakout point. We never really retested that. So there's a lot of areas back that we could just be going back to retest. And obviously if Washington can ever get their act together and resolve this sequester issue effectively, it would be very bullish for the market. As a matter of fact, I think there's a lot of people trying to get short here. And again, the problem with being short before the market actually rolls is when you're wrong, you get squeezed. And we may get a break here of something for a couple of days or whatever, but if they get anything worked out and hammered out as that starts to play into the market and play into the economy, you can get a very quick bounce again and a very nice short squeeze out of that. So let's just be on our toes, keeping an eye on the futures as we always do, paying attention to market direction and taking trades that make sense based on the market direction at the time. Now here's the NASDAQ 100. Not nearly as interesting as we've been talking about for a long time. January very flat, February a couple gaps but otherwise flat. March, look at this. This is the flattest few months in terms of just intra-month activity that I can recall on the NASDAQ or on any of the major indices. And I've been trading since 1993. I mean, this is just absolutely unbelievable to see. And we did get a gap down, like I said, Friday after the sell-off Wednesday, kind of a measuring day Thursday. You can see what the gap down led us to. But we did recover, by the way. From that gap, it was all uphill from there during the day. So it's not like the market is... the only sell-off we really had was on Wednesday. Okay, it's not like the market is selling off sharply here on volume. There was more volume Wednesday and the down day here, which could have been people sort of guessing that data was not going to be so great Friday. It wasn't exactly... It didn't take a rocket scientist to estimate that that was going to miss based on the sequester. So then they come back and buy the market back up, cover their shorts. This did fill a gap, by the way, from right here that you could see that we had left about a month ago. And so now we've got a gap above. There's still a gap below from the last day of last year. We gapped up January, the first trading day of January. So there is still a gap down here. And again, just to reach down 100 points and fill that, and there's another gap back here in November. But just to reach back and fill that would not really be a big negative to the market. It would actually, if we could do it quickly, it would give us a nice environment for us to do some shorting, and then a bounce off of that, would give us another environment to the long side, which has got to be better than some of what you're seeing right here. We've had a lot of light volume days, obviously. Here's Apple, by the way. It's had this gap at 420.05. That's the number to watch. And today's low was 419.68. So we did fill that gap today, reached right down and filled it. By the way, in the process of doing that, if I switch you over to the intraday chart of Apple, in the process of doing that move, this was actually a 9-bar move on the 5-minute to the downside to fill the gap, and exactly on the 9th bar, which we count for 9, then we got the bounce right off of that. So they reached down to fill the gap and gave you a 9-bar setup to reverse off of it. Pretty interesting. Late in the day on a Friday with no volume in the market. Really, really interesting action. So Apple has fulfilled that gap. We knew that was coming. Now the question is, there's a gap back at 370. Is that the next thing? Or, are we going to start heading up? There's some gaps to fill higher. But again, when we got back here to this 420 area in Apple, way back over here, and we filled this gap, which was back from January of a year ago, we gapped the next morning back up, so that left the gap again. So to this time, if they're going to try to take it north and not have to come back. They need to not leave these gaps behind as they go. But a lot of the movement we've seen in terms of money is just a roll back and forth between Apple and Google. You'll notice that Google made this nice move up from November with the market, and now has pulled back and almost exactly hit that static trend line, that red line today at the low. Pretty interesting there as well. Let's take a look at the semiconductor index, which has not been very interesting. And there's a look at it. Has really nothing to show for itself at all. And then we'll also look at the biotech index, which has been strong, but it's really that 1550 area there that I think maybe could retest on a pullback in the market. That's the target I would look for there. All right, let's take a look at the economic data that's coming out this week here in the U.S. There isn't much, but let me pull it up. Okay, so there's no data at all on Monday. Here's Tuesday. We've got the wholesale inventories data. Not a big deal for anybody. Wednesday, MBA mortgage index, crude oil inventories, treasury budget, and the minutes from the last Fed meeting. Again, none of that critically important. Thursday, initial and continuing jobless claims. That comes out every week. It's important, but not that critical since it comes out so often. Import-export prices, not a big deal. Natural gas, nothing there. Friday, retail sales, PPI, and the Michigan sentiment and business inventories. Obviously, that's the most data right there of any of the days this week, but none of it's super hypercritical to the stock market. The CPI will be coming out next week. That'll be more important. So what does that mean for this week? Well, obviously, there's the sequester of concern. There's still a lot of issues out of Europe with what's going on over there in Cyprus. There's obviously concerns about North Korea to an extent. But we have no economic data to focus on, and volume has been light. It started to pick up on Wednesday on that roll. You want to see the volume in. That's what's going to give you the movement as usual. So we're monitoring that carefully, and we'll be tracking what we call our key measurements of that every day at 30 minutes and 60 minutes into the market. Helps us predict whether or not it's going to be an active day or the type of day where you want to be out there trying really hard. So Wednesday we saw that big sell-off and we had good volume. That was kind of the indicator there. Everybody have a great weekend, and we will see you in the lab on Monday.